Hi, everyone, and welcome to this third episode of the Hero's Dose Dream series. This is a special series that our team thought would be really important as we continue to look at the human being as this entire beingness, right? This whole circle, full circle, all the different aspects. And dreams are just so important to our lived experience, both when we're asleep and when we're awake, and also when working with sacraments and psychedelics. So we've been working through several folks in this series. Everyone has different perspectives, great insights, backgrounds that vary in education. And I hope that if you've been following along, you're really excited about today's conversation. I'd like to introduce you all to Tyler Friesen. He's the co-founder of the Counter Complex. Tyler and his wife have spent years guiding men and women's groups in bi-weekly dream circles, treating dreams not as a secondary material, but as a primary doorway into healing, integration, and sustained inner work. Mentored by Michael Walker and grounded in the psychospiritual framework of integrative self analysis, Tyler brings in-depth psychology, somatic awareness, and mythic dimensions of all the psyche. He also brings extensive experience supporting dream integration alongside altered states, including working with our beloved intentional 5-MeO-DMT and iboga microdosing context. In this conversation, we're going to explore a lot about the dream psyche from his perspective. Really excited to have you here, Tyler. Welcome to this little special chat at the Sacred Synthesis.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So first question is, why dreams? Why dream work? Why is that significant to you and your work?
Yeah, so good question. I would have been asking myself the same question 4 years ago when it was first kind of presented to me, which was a very, how do you say it, synchronous kind of serendipitous thing that came into our lives at the time, right when we needed it most. So dreams, what we found is that they're uniquely equipped, being what we feel is a kind of artwork that's perfected by the soul that is both descriptive and prescriptive for this emergent self that's trying to come forth. We're unfortunately we're kind of raised in a society that inevitably is a bit traumatizing, and I think most of us would probably agree. So dreams are of particular interest to me right now because they're an endogenous source of inspiration, much like 5-MeO or one of these sacred medicines are exogenous in nature. Dreams actually have the potential of bringing about kind of a psychedelic experience without the need for something external. So dreams are a very profound thing. And my goal would really be to motivate people to really start engaging with them meaningfully, because if you're anything like me, especially being a man, the idea of engaging with dreams seems so woo-woo that you just kind of want to dismiss it. But it is not so. It is very concrete, it's very grounded, and it's very real. It's just that they're speaking to us in a language that is unfamiliar to the Western mind. It's archetypal, symbolic, and it uses a kind of imagery. Now, imagery is unique because imagery is the one form of communication that kind of bridges the heart and the mind. So what we found is that when you're wounded, when you have something, inside of you that's trying to be healed, it usually is emotional in nature. So there has to be some sort of medium that bridges the intellect, which is non-emotional, and the heart space, which is what we gain access to when we go into a psychedelic experience, is this energetic aliveness. And so dreams are uniquely qualified to do that. They communicate in a way that bridges those two worlds. So that's why dreams are so important.
When you bring up a really interesting point around the masculine embodied folks, finding dreams a little more woo-woo or a little bit more dismissive. I know in my relationship containers with men over the years, I've been usually the one chatting about my dreams, always waking up, really engaged with like, hey, this is what I experienced. What were your dreams about? And they've tended to be a little bit tighter lip. So I know you said like their significance and their importance, but what are some tips for men to start to tune in a little bit more if they've been dismissive of their dreams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been running a men's group for the last 3 years, and almost all the men that arrive there don't arrive there with some sort of thinking problem. They usually arrive with something deeper and emotional that's non-intellectual. That um, how do I say this? I'll say this. So most of our approach, and this is for the men because this is kind of a logical framework with which to understand this. But the Western model of mental health is usually this top-down approach, which is, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's this idea that we can think our way into better feeling. And what we have to understand is that everything is downstream from the limbic system, or the instinctual part of us, which is emotional. So everything that's going on in our brain is a result of what's going on in the primary system, the limbic system, the emotional part of us. So, what's interesting, and the way you can tell that we have an issue, especially as men in particular, is that when we do talk about things that are emotional in nature, there is this reaction, this gut reaction to resist it or run away from it. Because I would argue that men are actually particularly sensitive.
Mm,
And especially in early life, when we come into the world without the ego structure to protect us from wounding, we're subject to a lot of harm. And so there's a corruption that can happen to those energies. Not that the energies are wrong, not that the reaction was wrong, but I'll say it like this: there's a protective device in the psyche that will compartmentalize and put things into, you could call it the shadow, into the unconscious part of us, for out of necessity, right? Like we come into the world authentic, we try to express ourselves. Maybe for men, we have particularly masculine emotions like anger, which are totally normal and protective. But we're taught early on that those parts of us are not allowed. And if we want to continue to exist in community, we need to put them somewhere else for us to remain safe and connected. And we're dependent, being tribal animals, mammals. We have to exist in community. So in order to continue to exist in community, we sacrifice our authenticity to do that. And the way by which that happens is mammals are unique. We have an intellect, and that intellect is dissociative by necessity. It's supposed to kind of dissociate from emotions temporarily to help reroute them to and adapt to a very complex world. But for many of us in which that happens at such a young age, we don't realize that we've been doing that for the last, several decades since that wound occurred. We've just been dissociating. And so we live a very logical life, a non-instinctual life, and even the sound of something emotional in nature is disgusting to us because it is the protective mechanism that keeps us safe.
mm,
And so that can be a very challenging thing to overcome because it comes with it. What shows up is a lot of inflation. And that's a very particular, what we would call a complex
mhm.
that is difficult to address.
Sure. And how, when men are coming into your containers, and you start to introduce them to dream work, how is that a little bit different of approach than what you might experience with females?
Yeah, well, females tend to be very open to healing. There's something unique about the feminine psyche. Very fluid. They're very, open. That's not always the case. There are exceptions, obviously, and in particular with the wounding we have in current society. We're seeing more and more of it happen in the feminine space, and my wife could speak more to that. But so when kind of dealing with these things, we have to give them something for their intellect to latch onto very quickly, right away. And so we try to do that soon to make sense of this stuff in a way that's concrete and real. Because we're trying to give them an experience that's outside of the limitations of their current personality structure.
Mm,
So that's what dreams can do. And so when you engage with it, it's a riddle. You have to. It's a beautiful riddle. And when you solve that riddle, or when you get close to it, there's an energy that comes alive. There's an awakening sort of thing, a recognition that's unquestionable. So we try to reach that as quickly as we can. And it seems to be can be a little challenging with men. So yeah, and women just tend to be open to that already. They almost live their lives by that nature already. They're very, very intuitive and very emotional and instinctual by
Mhm.
nature. So
Yeah. And you're trained in something called integrative self analysis. What is that?
yeah, so like I said, 4 years ago, I reconnected with, I call him a mentor of mine. His name's Michael Walker. He's located in Denmark, and his work is profound. And he's a he's he's a wizard. I don't know how else to say it, but he's developing this, and he's writing a few books. So we're kind of on the bleeding edge of this. But he's been calling it integrative self analysis. He's actually playing with a name change.
Okay.
Um, but it's a psychospiritual model that's big enough to kind of hold the mundanity of the human experience, as well as the more numinous qualities of being human, this spiritual part of us. And it's kind of a it's a basically a model to help remedy the Western thinking around who we are and mental health in general.
Mm.
But it's a big topic, and we kind of get into it. I encourage a lot of the content around that. You can kind of get a glimpse of it by just visiting the website, countercomplex.com, thecountercomplex.com,
Mm-hmm.
which I just republished. So I think when we spoke last, I was in the process of revamping it. So we finally got it launched. But if I were to summarize it, it's what it is it's this way of working with people. Here's the truth. Most of our wounding happens in relationship.
Yeah.
And what most of us are doing is trying to heal alone.
Hmm.
We're reading books and
Right.
trying to do these things. And it's not that it's not valuable. It's just that most of what happens in relationship must be healed in relationship. Um, as an example, for someone like me, right, I had severe mother wounding, not because my mom's a bad person, but just because for generations we had wounding on the matriarchal side. And then not only that, but an absence of fatherhood. So, for me, it was like, if I could summarize it, it was this idea that I could only be seen if I was impressive and a good boy, right? So that kind of thinking, and it gets deeper, and I know that seems fairly benign, relatively speaking, to a lot of that I've been through. But the process for me of healing that wound is the ability to be seen for what is not impressive and not good.
Hmm.
So that had to happen in relationship and in a container that could do that. And it has been happening in relationship with my now wife, who, kind of served as almost a surrogate. That this kind of, here's something I'll say is if you want to know someone's relationship with their parent of the opposite sex, just look at their current relationship with their significant other. It's almost mirrored in almost every case.
Hmm.
So that's not only kind of points out the problem, but also the potential for the solution. All of these wounds and these dynamics and complexes that show up in our life are also the opportunities. So they're both. This is kind of the paradox of existence.
Right.
Most of the time, we're only looking at one or the other, right? Where it's either a problem or it's the solution, and it's we're not dealing with either. So that's just an example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And when leaning into this understanding that you have and we heal more in relationship, how do dream circles come into that formula in some way?
It's so great that you asked that, because there is this magic. I mean, there's kind of a tribute to the way we were in the past as a tribe. And, we used to sit around fireplaces and relate around imagery.
Hmm.
That was kind of this main medium of communication. We had, we told stories, we related to myths and archetypes, and that's how we basically developed that muscle of instinct, you could call it. And so, engaging with people in a dream work container, there's something really unique about dreams and imagery. And it's that the imagery can, everybody has their own relationship to images. The same way when we watch movies, right? Everybody watches the same movie and they relate with it and get hit emotionally about certain things, but in a very personal way. It's a metaphor for themselves, but also holds the archetype that can relate to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so dreams are that exact same thing. So when you're doing that in a circle, not only is the person allowed to be seen for what they're dealing with in that, but they're also kept safe in the sense that the medium of the imagery is kind of a buffer that protects them from being exposed or shamed for these very particular, details of perhaps something they're dealing with. And everyone can relate to the imagery in their own way, and it can actually offer healing to even the person relating to the dream in the same way we would relate to a movie. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. I've not thought about like dream circles in that way before, and full transparency, I've never been a part of one, but now I'm very intrigued from the conversations I've been having. So, what does the way that you run your circles? What's the formula? How do you set it up, and why? What's the intention behind people gathering? I mean, obviously it's healing, but what else is deeper there?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, it's really about community building, right?
Mm,
We're like, so one of the things we talk about a lot is this ground up approach
mm,
of, emotional is primary to the intellect. As we talk about the 7 basic human instincts that have been documented by, there's a neuroscientist named Jacques Panksepp. He wrote a book called Affective Neuroscience. He was one of the only doctors to do a deep dive on the emotional system.
mm.
And he kind of outlined, and I'll show this page here. This will be helpful to kind of outline this. Just a sec here. Okay, so these 7 basic human instincts are, if you're starting from the center out, this is care. Care is the first instinct to develop. It develops in relationship with the child to its mother. And if you were to summarize what care really is, it's the ability to see and to be seen. And this is a really important thing. I mean, if you can heal that part of you, it almost takes care of the rest. And we are running a local, I'm calling it a ceremony, but I don't think my wife likes that name, but
I think it's great. Yeah.
we're running like and it's interesting because these instincts are related, if you wanted to look at it through an Eastern lens, through kind of the 7 chakras or the 7 energy centers of the body. But this is more of a Western kind of way of seeing it, which I think is important for anybody who may be tuning in. But care is related to the heart chakra. It's the ability to see and to be seen. And then you have these other ones that kind of radiate outwards. Rage is a protective instinct. It protects what's sacred. It protects your position in the tribe. Play is the learning instinct associated with joy and all the hormones that go with that. Each of these have related hormones. So it's all grounded. It's not like some esoteric thing that we're speaking to. And then you have lust and seeking. Lust is almost the energy of life. It's libidinal energy. It's life force, and it wants to go somewhere. It's the urge to merge. It's the urge to create. Like birds build these big, fantastic nests, which gives them purpose through this seeking or expression of that energy. And it's designed to, create and pull life in, and to, make children, and to carry our life force forward in time. And then you have fear and grief, and these are 2 big ones that, grief, you could associate that with the crown chakra. It's kind of these are the last 2 things, especially in a 5-MeO experience, where it's like you grieve your ephemeral nature, right? The temporal self, and you experience that oneness and eternity. It's kind of the doorway into that spiritual awareness, which is why it's associated with the crown. And fear is related to the base or the base chakra, the thing that's concerned with survival, keeping the body alive. And so all of these instincts, and I'll kind of stop here, but all of these instincts are designed to exist in community. they're designed to keep us connected to each other, and they're also the you could call it the language of the soul, like our purpose and everything. It speaks to us through these felt senses, right? These instincts, we call them. And my mentor, he calls it the instinctual consciousness, which is another name for the soul or the higher self, which I think is a better term because it really speaks to the actual physical part of us that is that as well, right? There's these 7 colors of expression that come through us, and it's this medium of communication that's higher bandwidth than the intellect, right? There's so much more data that can be conveyed through emotional stuff, and then the ego is it's subservient to that. It's supposed to be, the intellect is supposed to be kind of the thing that holds and contains and directs that energy in some way, in a meaningful way, in a grounded way, in reality. So we're trying to help reset this, and I forget your question, but I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it was great just tuning into what's going on in these dreamy states. And I'm curious, you'd mentioned the shadow self quite a while ago, but do you have any understanding of how dreams might expose what we could call shadow material that's might be bypassed in other spaces in our lives, even in psychedelic ceremony?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's really the crux of our work, is that so we talk about this yin and yang of the self, these 2 aspects of our personality, both of which make up the whole. So we talked about kind of the instinctual consciousness or the higher self, the emotional part of us. All of our energy of the self is contained in that. And then we have this other part of us, this limited, kind of smaller part of us, that is the identity or the personality structure that we call the ego. So many spiritual circles and a lot of kind of the new age spirituality is they're always making the ego the enemy. And I would push back on that a bit, because the ego isn't the enemy. What they're really talking about is what we call a protective ego construct, which is a personality structure based on the dissociation from that part of ourselves, from the energetic part of ourselves. So one of the blessings and curses about a psychedelic experience is that it will shut down the whole protective ego construct for a moment, so you can have this very numinous experience of your true nature, right? Or the whole of who you are. However, it can also be a bit of a challenge, and almost double down on some of these complexes that we have around it, where it's this idea that can come from like, oh, I can now know who I am with this substance. And it becomes this, exogenous thing, and then this relationship to the external world, and none of it's actually internal anymore. And so what's really unique about dreams is that dreams, they give just the right recipe. It's like artwork, like I said, perfected by the soul. And it gives just the right recipe of imagery that the ego can handle. So you don't have this total collapse of the self, even though it can be very challenging and confronting to this ego construct that's designed to keep parts of ourselves out of, our experience or emotion away from us. The dreams are perfectly tailored to give imagery that can help us to go just beyond its current limitation without total collapse. So, part of the challenge with a big psychedelic experience is that you'll have these people that then can't exist in both worlds. They're like either totally spiritual at the detriment of their physical existence, or they're completely physical, like grieving the fact that they can't access this numinous state anymore, and then having to return to it. And the way we talk about it is we use the analogy of Jack and the Beanstalk, right? So something like 5-MeO or a high dose mushroom experience or something can bring this experience of being up in the clouds and the golden goose, right? But then you have the famine down on earth, right? So the really important structure that we need to build is the beanstalk, the thing that connects the 2 worlds.
Yeah.
And so that's what our work is really centered on. It's beanstalk stuff, we're really pointing to that, and that being the medium by which we can channel everyone's individual, unique, big soul purpose
Yeah.
into reality, because that's where the gold is, right? We
Yeah.
have to bring the golden goose down to earth.
I'm totally with you. I feel really grateful, personal anecdote here, that I first found, well, okay, like endogenous psychedelic experience, visions, all these things before I started working with psychedelics. So I've always treated them in this like state of reverence, and like only when I feel these really strong pulls to go and work with the sacraments do I. Um, because I don't feel like the answers really lie outside of us. I really think they're all internal, and working with beautiful compounds can be great assistance in some measure. And that's why I love what we're doing here at the Sacred Synthesis and working with like low 5 microdose of methoxin, because with the low 5, you're not going way out into unity consciousness or totally disassociating or hitting the reset button on your nervous system and your ego. You're actually, I mean, everyone's physiology is a little bit different, but for the most part, everyone is like staying very attuned to what's somatically happening in their body, what other experiences are coming forward in their multisensory state. And I think that allows for a much more integrated experience into medicine and sacrament work, which again, as you're saying, it's building the beanstalk. And with that, I kind of carry this question of, you know, if you have, I use a hypothetical, maybe this is a real life application in your work, but say you're working with a group and they are having a psychedelic ceremony, is there a way to tell kind of post ceremony in their dream work if they're integrating well from that psychedelic journey or not?
It's a good question. So I can reflect a bit. There's two things I'll bring up. I'll reflect a bit about my own experience, because I dealt with this. I dealt with this personally, and one of the ways that my dreams were kind of showing me that I was being a bit overwhelmed by the kind of energies that I was accessing through psychedelic experiences was I was having a lot of dreams of being like on the edge of very dangerous water. Or I would be, and this is unique, right? I'm not trying to give a prescription for everyone. And this is what every dream is unique, and we need to engage with each person on an individual level. But I was having a lot of dreams of being like either underwater and in danger, or I remember one, I was like on this, this like staircase of like cement, big stairs, and there was these huge waves, and there was like a bridge, and I was under it, and I was felt threatened, and it was very overwhelming. And it was a bit alarming. It was saying that, this energy that I was accessing was just a bit overwhelming for my personality structure. So they weren't in line.
Hmm.
And it was difficult for me. And so and then in order for my psyche to make sense of that difficulty, it would have to basically make stuff up in
Hmm.
order to try to integrate these things. And I was kind of in a state of, and we've seen this before. I mean, we've worked with a lot of people, and this isn't a judgment about anyone. In fact, it's comes from deep compassion, but there's the kind of person that will, talk about these very highly numinous things while their life is falling apart.
Right.
And, in some ways I could relate with that. Or my relationships were falling apart, or just I was struggling in general while feeling like I was accessing something very meaningful, right? So there's tricks that can take place. But one of the ways that we really can tell if someone's making progress in that department is that if we ask them about their numinous experiences, can they relate it in neutral language? Can they speak to, like, if I had no experience with psychedelics, could they actually convey it in a way that would make sense to that person?
Hmm.
That to me is a good metric.
That's extremely intriguing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, for anyone who's new here to dream interpretation, dream study, self work with dreams, can you kind of give like an entry level? This is where I would start if I were you.
Yeah, I'd love to. So So yeah, so when we talk about engaging with dreams, we're talking about starting to relate with the higher self, the soul of us, right? It's a relationship, and so when we demonstrate intent, meaning we put a binder or a book or download an app on our phone, and we say, I'm going to start recording dreams, right? That usually can be enough to signal that you're ready to receive information that is hopefully going to help you. And it's always it does so in a very intelligent way. So we first want to learn that no dream it should be thrown aside, no matter how weird it is, right? But the difficult part we have, and this is just something to remember, is that when we wake back up and all the hardware boots back up in the mind, suddenly we're limited by the protective constructs and so it'll usually only allow certain information in that it permits is okay for where it wants to stay, right? So I can't recommend it enough, but really relating to it in a group setting is what helps us to kind of break outside of that. So it's useful. The dream circles we're running every other Sunday night are free. You guys can just jump in if anybody wants to. But okay, so to start with that's important. So and then when you wake up, you can use shorthand to write, like what I call them is like zip files. You can, if like, say I saw a grand cathedral with, candles, you could just say cathedral, right? Like you just write the word down. But there might be more details that come up later when you can wake up further and start writing more of it down. But I just make a habit of really trying to get as much content of the dream imagery as I possibly can. I try to limit my own interpretation of it when I'm first writing it down, right? You don't want to start contaminating it with the mind's tendency to want to make connections right away, because the ego will do that. The protective ego construct will do that in particular. So we try to stay as true to the imagery as we possibly can. You can write down your feelings and thoughts that you were having as the dream character as well. But that's just a good practice to start getting in the habit of doing that. That's really important. I've made a habit of because I'll wake up at 2 a.m. I'll feel I totally can remember this dream, and then it's gone in 30 minutes or even less, like within 5 seconds sometimes.
Yeah.
So as soon as I get up and I have anything to write down, I have my phone there, I have an app, and I immediately start. You can pull your voice recording out and just start taking as much as you can. And then a lot of the memories will come back once you have that recorded. But we're trying to bring something that's, doesn't have a concrete reality into concrete reality. So it does take that effort. But some interesting notes that we've been learning about dreams is that, so this is maybe a little more advanced, but I'll give it to us anyway. So, there's this really interesting thing that we'll do is that we'll record the first person experience. We'll record all the thoughts and feelings of that I character in the dream, right? And then we'll record what was going on. But then sometimes when we start looking at the dream and what it means, we'll give particular emphasis to the I character. But something we have to remember is that my mentor, he says this, the dream is having you. It's not the other way around. So what the dream is doing is it's writing a script for the ego position. And so that I character is showing you your ego position in relationship to these symbols in the dream. And so as an example, say you have this dream of, you're on a cliff's edge and there's a sunset coming up, but you're terrified because you're on a cliff's edge. But you don't fall in the dream. There's no falling off the cliff. So it's showing you, it can show you that your ego position in relationship to a sunrise or a new beginning is terrified. So there's kind of some unique things about that we've learned and pieced together over the years. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it makes complete sense. And of course, I'm scanning different dreams that I've had. I'm like, oh, okay, this makes a great deal of sense to me. And you did mention one thing which I find really fascinating in my dream world is there's so many times I'm thinking about like ego and all the different structures you've presented now, but where
Mhm.
I've had different types of dreams. They seem like there's different categories, and many are like I'm in the dream and I'm like sitting at a table and I'm like learning, and this council of people or beings, whatever, are like teaching me, and I'm always like, oh, I'm gonna remember all of this. Of course, I'm gonna take this back to Earth and remember it. And then, of course, I wake up and can't remember any of it. So
Mm,
share
mm.
that fun story because I'm curious what your thoughts are on like categories, and then maybe like what does that mean? Is there any meaning at all? If, especially if you're looking at it from the script that the dream is having me.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So you've been having a dream where you're in a classroom and you're trying to collect as much information,
Hmm.
and then you can't remember, sort of thing. Well,
Hmm.
it's so interesting because the intuition I have about you as a person is that you're very industrious, very much a go-getter, very structure oriented. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, it's just interesting because you could see that, something like that. I get like the image of like someone in school that's trying to gain as much intellectual prowess as they possibly can, but just feeling like, oh, I failed.
Hmm.
Which would to me say that there's a motivation there to become the most intellectually, competent person.
Hmm.
And my intuition, like where my instincts would take me on this is like, like, was there someone in your life that demanded very much high performance from you lest you be um not seen or something like that? That would be, maybe somewhere I'd go with it, but this is all,
Sure.
exploratory.
It's fun. It's fun to dance in that. I've never heard anyone else's interpretation of my dreams like that. So it is quite fun to revel in that. So I think I'm going to be coming to your dream circles.
Okay, really great. Yeah, it can
Yeah.
be it can be a bit personal, some of these things, especially in a group setting, especially if we're about to like unlock some. We call it, when we really get to the core of these things, we call it an affect bridge.
Mm,
It's this like bridge between the heart and the mind, where suddenly you gain access to this part of you that your mind has been intentionally blocking for the sense of safety. So there's a bit of a risk that is involved, and so we always really find it. We're very grateful for anybody willing to share those kinds of things, because it can be like, it can very much feel like you're being put on the spot, but that's also the medicine, because it's
right.
the idea of being seen for
Mm,
who you really are, right? Like that's what the world is begging for. The world is really asking for that kind of relationship with each other and ourselves.
yeah, I see a lot of value in the vulnerability of exposing ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
Tyler, I would like to just open up the floor. If there's anything we haven't touched on that's like really burning for you to share with the audience, please go for it, my man.
Um, well, if there's any kind of like pep talk I would give to anybody, it's just, um, you know, there, we all have a purpose that's very meaningful. And I think we're in a new stage, a new phase. We're moving into Aquarius. We're supposed to be this Armageddon time, and that's really the time. And, obviously God planted something like 5-MeO on Earth at this time to help probably bridge the gap. And I would just encourage people to really start to play with the idea that they were meant for something very big, and it's related to their authentic experience, and that
Mm,
it really is by us gaining access to our own personal myth, by really looking into our autobiography as a compass rather than a trauma and like something that's a
mm,
problem that we have to solve. But it's, really we're designed for something great, and we came for that. I do believe, just me personally, that we elected to come here to have this difficult experience, to actually make meaning of a very challenging world. So
yeah.
that's really yeah, the heartbeat of the counter complex and where we're coming from. So.
Yeah, I'm totally in alignment with everything that you've shared. And I think by taking that approach, we really do have a sense of like purpose, a sense of joy, even if you can find joy in the grittiness of life and the myriad of textures. And there's a great book, Existential Kink, I read forever ago that I lean on sometimes when I'm in like a moment of like, what is happening right now? I'm like, well, my soul kind of wanted to have this experience in some way, so I generated it. And what's the pleasure in this learning experience, and how can I emerge even more authentic from it?
Mm,
So, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to being of service to this community in any way. So definitely
that's
grateful for the time.
yeah. Well, thank you so much again for being here, sharing your wisdom, your heart with everybody. Those tuning in, thanks for your time. We'll put Tyler's information hyperlink below so you can tune more into what they're doing at the Counter Complex. And just a note, we have these conclaves every week. They're here to serve the community. If you all want to hear about a certain topic or want to recommend some people to come and share their wisdom with those who are here at the Sacred Synthesis, feel free to email us info@thesacredsynthesis.com. And always look for other events that we have. We are currently hosting a ceremony every month that is virtual. We'll have some more in-person retreats as the year progresses, and just so many other things to continue to build community and support for your journeys. So until next time, see you all.